Jeff, we have a new segment. All you've written here
Yes.
is burning questions. Over to you.
Yes, well, the segment, it'll be an occasional segment, but occasionally we get a piece of correspondence where I think this is a real burning question. This
Okay.
is something, this is interesting. I want to get into this on the show. And so this comes in from ED, all caps, who's been a nerd pledger before, who's a neutral observer who listens to the final word from Kentucky. And is involved in the manufacture of bourbon over there, as is my understanding. And so this isn't, because we're in sort of partisan crazy Ashes territory at the moment, I thought this was an interesting observation from someone outside it, from someone watching from a third-party country. And this is the question. What is the basis for the hatred everyone seems to have for Tim Paine? And I'll assume this means everyone in the UK. ED says, going back to news reports and Twitter, it appears to have started with the 17 Ashes and gone downhill from there. From then, where it was he's not good enough, to 18-19, he's a placeholder, to now he's only in the team because he's captain. I watched most of the Australia-India series last winter, and the early Ashes jingoism from Vaughan and co was ridiculous, particularly for a series their team wasn't in. Now, Jimmy Anderson is leading Tim Paine is a wanker chants at his live shows in Manchester. For months, the ECB has been publicly preemptive in these are our demands or we're not coming, according to The Guardian, says ED, seemingly twice a week since May. It seems disingenuous to be complaining about a very mild pushback from the opposing captain. So as an outsider, is this merely Ashes year animosity? Is it a generic hatred of sporting Australians? Or is it an international ad hominem reaching a mean girl level for reasons I cannot fathom?
Yeah, okay. Well, first of all, thanks, ED. That is an interesting email, an interesting topic. I hadn't really thought of it in those terms before. I suppose I get a bit of the England side living over here, and I hear it a bit more. Their position would be that Tim has led this post-sandpaper team where we're going to be better people. We are more mindful of the responsibilities we have as Test cricketers, and him sort of ushering in this new generation of Australian cricketer, whilst at the same time giving a fair bit of evidence that he's just the same as everyone else who's ever played for Australia as well. So they think there's an inherent hypocrisy within Paine. So I think that whole, he's not good enough or placeholder or whatever else, that's part of it, maybe peripherally, but it's mostly they don't much fancy the alleged hypocrisy of Paine, whether that's the, get into the Gabba stuff with Ashwin, but that was a bit more than that, wasn't it? It was the quite cutting, personal, snide stuff that Paine apologised for the next day, by the way. So he knew he'd done wrong and backed over. I don't imagine some of his predecessors would have been apologetic the morning after, the night before, so to speak. No. So, I think that Paine, on that basis, it cops a bit of a rough whack because he has tended to at least acknowledged where he has overstepped, dare I say, the line. However, I also I do see where they're coming from when they interpret his comments the other week. Remember that 140,000 people have died because of COVID in the UK, and when it could have been interpreted as Paine being quite flippant around COVID and the England team and kind of suck it up, princess. I put it in my column in Wisden. It was akin to, meet you at the Gabba on the 8th of December for an ass kicking. That they would be, well, hang on, mate. Like, it's not quite as straightforward as that. We've played 18 test matches through COVID. You've played 4. We've travelled around the world. You've done none of that. We've done it tough at home. Australia have had lockdowns, but they haven't experienced anything like the sort of grief, I suppose, that Brits have. So that would be, I think, the perspective of many English cricket fans as a starting point on the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's right in covering some of it, in that it is the fact that when Paine was initially coming out and saying we're going to be better and different, there was a lot of cynicism about that, particularly from England, saying, we'll believe it when we see it. And so anything that's been contrary to that, the Ashwin blow-up's the most obvious one, because when you're on TV and you're a wicketkeeper, everything you're saying is getting piped into the microphones. And it's not like there was a report that he said something on the field. It's like everybody can hear 2.5 minutes of this sort of chuntering going on while they're watching the game live. And so it makes someone look stupid. But in terms of there is a pettiness and a kind of viciousness to it from some quarters, which I reckon is a lot to do with resenting being like having to treat someone like Tim Paine with the like having that person having the prominence of being Australian captain without having the sort of player record that an England cricket fan would expect them to have. Like an England fan is used to Australia being captained by Ricky Ponting or Steve Waugh, or someone with an imposing record, someone who you can hate but you have to respect their ability to some extent. And so then it's really easy to shit on a guy who's got a modest record because he's a wicketkeeper. There have been some great batting wicketkeepers, but not that many. If you look back through the history, there aren't a lot of wicketkeepers who make a lot of Test hundreds. There have been, there might have been 15 or 20 for the various teams across the years, but for the most part, that's not how it works. And so it's a lot easier to get stuck into a player like that because you can go, oh, look, he's never made a Test 100. Oh, look, he averages 30 with the bat. Yeah, well, guess what? So does every wicketkeeper, aside from a few freaks through the history of the game. That's what they do. That's what their job is. So I feel like it's partly a resentment at being chipped at, like that there is a little bit of chippiness by someone who they don't think is good enough to be telling them that. Like how shitty they were when Tim Paine at Edgbaston said, we don't care about Edgbaston, and then Australia went out and won there. They were like the local press response to that was not happy at all, and it was really based on who does he think he is. He's not. Ricky Ponting might have been allowed to say that, but not this guy. Who the hell is he? He's a clubby. He doesn't count. He's not at Test level. Blah blah blah.
Yeah, and the other point here is that Paine actually had a pretty good series against India. If I recall correctly, he was player of the match at Adelaide, I reckon, Jeff, with his 80-odd not out, which gave Australia the modest first innings lead, which was enough to win comfortably. He made a half-century at Brisbane, batting with Marnus, if I recall correctly. So the point here is that he isn't sort of going to be dropped or anything like that. He is stabilised where he is in the team. Didn't have a great 19 Ashes, but the last couple of years his batting has got him to a certain point. And Dan Brettig often writes about this when trying to provide context to Paine's career with the bat. He's done a lot of this, the majority of it, as an international cricketer with a shattered finger. It takes a lot of bravery to do what he does with his finger in the state that it's in and to change the way he plays as well. So there's that extra context with Paine and his batting. And yeah, I reckon where you've landed on there is about right, that they're like, why can this bloke tell us anything? And the fact that Paine is an enthusiastic member of the pre-Ashes Bants community probably doesn't help the situation. I spoke about this, I think maybe a couple of weeks ago, and wrote about it in my Wisden Cricket Monthly piece this month, about just how nauseating and cringeworthy and sort of infuriating the whole thing is. And the fact that Paine's played a role in that, maybe he feels like he must as Australian captain. Maybe it's kind of like what Nathan Lyon said back in 2017 when he made those quite ridiculous comments about hoping he would end careers. I mean, who thinks that, let alone says it? That's not in keeping with the Nathan Lyon I know. And he said later he was trying to take pressure off the guys coming into the team unexpectedly. Coincidentally, Tim Paine, who were wearing plenty of heat that day after Chris Barrett broke that story, and Nathan Lyon goes out the next morning and changes the narrative, I suppose you would say. So there's like, everybody feels like they have an expectation ahead of an Ashes series to behave in a certain way, and it's just embarrassing. And the fact that Paine might feel as though he has a responsibility to play in that this time around, and he did in 2019, it just kind of adds to it. So yeah, there's a broader, much wider proliferation of people not being their best selves ahead of these kinds of series.
Yep. And then it does delve into that mean girl side of things when it's like, if it were a good player saying these things to us, then, we wouldn't attack them on the basis of them not being a good player. But
the Barmy Army stuff, right? The Barmy Army stuff with Paine the other week, and and others piling in and Paine responding, and it all feeds that phony war. And Bormy wrote a nice piece about this on the weekend in the Age too. That wouldn't be happening if it were Ricky Ponting, obviously. Obviously. Yep. Anyway, I think that dealt with the question reasonably well.
Yeah,
we should do it more often. So. Burning questions. How do they get them in, Jeff?
You send them. Well, that one came in via the patron DMs.
Okay.
So that's a good way if you want to join up there. Otherwise, you can find us on, 50 other social media platforms where we live currently.
Well, I jumped on the Discord, I should say, as we move into Nerd Pledge and talk a bit about Brick Lane briefly before we move the conversation to domestic cricket. I jumped on Discord for the first time in a couple of weeks yesterday. Obviously, I was away overseas and then quite busy in the couple of weeks leading up to it and just needed to focus on work and then focus on chasing a baby around a pool. That Discord page is kicking off. There are people everywhere. The conversation's unbelievable. So maybe if you want to submit a burning question and you're a patron, and you can do so on Discord. And if you're not yet a patron, that Discord page or that Discord channel might be part of an incentive to get involved, because people who love the game, I already see that there are a lot of people who are planning their meetups for the Ashes. We had meetups during the England-India series. Lots of people, even at the Rachel Hayhoe-Flint trophy final at Northants a few weeks ago, a game I was on comms for, we had some members of the Final Word community catching up for a drink there too. So that's where it's at the moment, and that might be a nice gentle segue into, Jeff, a little segment of